Hi again then guys, and so we've got another custom special project build for you today, and this time it's not a replica build. I wish that it was, to be honest, but there is, surprisingly to me anyway, no racing version that I can find of the Alfa Romeo 8C, either from Alfa Romeo themselves or even from a privateer team. That's very odd to me. The car naturally lends itself towards being a GT3 car. It has the perfect base specs to work into a racing model. I would have thought Alfa Romeo would at least make some kind of hardcore version, but apparently not. In the game though, we can make a pretty good representation of what this car could be like as a GT3 spec model. So, first of all, I'll show you, of course, what I've done to get the visual look of the car, and being as it is not a replica, there is a fair amount of room for personal variation. Then, of course, more importantly, we'll go over to the tuning garage for the mechanical setup, and finally out to the track to see what it can do. Now, as far as the visual look of the car, as I said, it's not based on an existing model, so there is room for variation, especially with the rims and the body colour, of course. For the body itself, I've gone for the custom Type A upgrade, of course, which gives you the winglets and an enlarged chin splitter on the front bumper. There is very unfortunately not a flat floor on this one, which is a real shame. For the rear wing, obviously you can choose whichever one you want, but I've gone for the Type B special wing, which looks really good on this car. For the rims, I've gone for very racing-esque BBS LMRs, again, down to personal preference. I've chosen not to fit additional meters. A lot of people would, I just don't personally like the look of them in some cars' interiors. They look kind of tacky sometimes, and this is one of the cars where I say it does look tacky for me personally. As far as the body, we've not gone for the obvious choice of colour, which is Alpha Red, or Scuderia, or any Rosso, all those kind of obvious colours. I've actually gone for a German red, which is Tornado Rot, which comes from Volkswagen, a couple of different Volkswagen models, including the Polo GTI, or Lupo GTI I should say, not the Polo, and the Mark IV Golf, if you want that particular colour. And for the rims, we have gone for red, ironically, number 764. Any of you who have been around on my channel will of course know that's the glitched colour. If you're unfamiliar with the glitched colour, I will put a link in the description below of how to get that glitched solid black look, which I think looks really good and fits in with the racing look of the car. And I've also gone for that same colour for the brakes. So that's it for the visual setup. I've also, obviously, as you can see, opted for the blank racing stickers or livery on the car, very limited livery. But again, it's down to personal preference. So now let's go over to the tuning garage for the mechanical setup. Now, as far as the mechanical setup on this particular car, obviously we're not working from any real model, so I wanted to give it specs that were realistic for a GT3 spec machine, but also PP relevant. And I'm happy to say I was able to do so. It has a realistic GT3 spec in terms of weight and power, but also sits at what I would say is a very good PP. Not too high, not too low for what it's capable of. So I've opted for racing soft tyres, but I know everyone has their own personal preference there. I've increased the rear brake balance to 6. That is a personal preference of mine. You don't have to do that. For the springs, I've got the front ride height as low as possible, the rear 10mm higher. The main reason for that is because this car naturally has its nose in the air a little bit, and I just wanted to even out the look of the car, make it more level. Springs we've increased to 1275 and 1450. Dampers to 5, anti-roll to 7, camber on 2.5 with neutral toe. For the gearbox, an auto setting of 180. Then for the individual gears, we've got 3.7, 2.5, 1850, 1450, 1175 and 975, with a final drive of 3.1. For the diff, the lowest initial torque, acceleration of 40 and braking of 10. Now, I like my racing replicas and custom builds to have fairly heavy steering. I prefer that to a car that's constantly sliding. I know different people prefer other things though, so if you do prefer your car to have slightly looser steering and be a little bit more prone to fishtailing around corners a bit, if that's more what you like, then you may want to increase the braking sensitivity a little bit, maybe up to 20 or even 30. As far as the power, we do have an oil change on this one, so you need to bear that in mind. And basically I've fitted all of the tuning parts that raise the red line, because we need this car to rev high so it sounds and performs like a racing car. Now, you don't have to do the settings that I've done here. You can get more power out of this particular PP if you actually fit less things than I have. But as I said, this is for if you want it to have the highest red line possible, which in the case of this car is 9,000 RPM. So you want the Stage 3 engine tune, sports computer, race exhaust, not the manifold, because that doesn't increase the PP, or it doesn't increase the revs, I should say. You want your sports cat, and not the sports intake, for the same reason it doesn't affect the red line, so it's kind of unnecessary for my purpose. Then we've reduced the power down to 93%. We've got the downforce as high as possible. Unfortunately, it doesn't have that much downforce. We could really have done with a lot more than that. You want the full weight loss package, of course, and we've got an 82 kilo ballast placed 49% towards the front of the car, and the ballast actually brings us nicely up to the perfect weight for a GT3 spec machine, and also to our PP level. So overall, I'm very happy with the specs that this car manages to have at its particular PP level. It's very relevant, both PP wise and for the racing class. So now let's go out to the track to see what it can do. So overall, this car isn't going to win every race that you enter with it. That's not really the purpose of this build. Obviously, it is a racing designed model, but this is more a car for people who like to try something different, perhaps more of a challenge, or just don't like driving the obvious choices that everyone else uses, like the Nissan GTR GT3s, the BMW GT3s, etc. It's certainly a competitive car for its PP level. I would say it's more inclined towards technical tracks rather than pure speed or purely tight tracks. But overall, have fun with the design. I would encourage you to mess around with the settings, find what works best for you. And if you'd like to see tune setups like this as soon as they come out, be sure to subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.